Hello, everyone. I'm Karen Gaborik, host of this podcast, Good News, Intuition Works. And the message is intuition works. It really does. And I'm here today to share good news and invite us to use this very important skill in our lives every single day. There is a whole world out there we can tap into, and so many other sources of wisdom available to us. And we get so many reminders every day that we are not alone. And this podcast is a celebration of how trusting yourself first and learning to use your own intuition can make a real difference in your everyday life. Now, if you would like to learn more about some of the intuition skills and practices that you hear about today, please visit Inner Access 101 and explore all of the offerings from Lori Wilson, who is the owner and co-founder of Inner Access 101. You can find links to her website and to her various social media accounts in the show notes. Today, it is my pleasure to interview Shahmeen Sadiq. And so, welcome, Shahmeen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Karen. It's lovely to be here.
Now, I have a little bit that I want to share about you, and then, of course, we'll hear more from you. But Shahmeen comes to us from Waterloo, Ontario, in Canada. She's a master certified coach and the owner of Anjali Leadership. Shahmeen has been leading the leadership development of executives and senior leaders since 2005. Shahmeen creates spaces where it is safe to be human together, and she shows her clients how to do that as well. Shahmeen weaves a lifetime of diverse learning into potent, transformational invitations for people who are interested in becoming whole, empowered contributors to the well-being of humanity. She is also a published poet and a visual artist. She's written a book, Heart Matters, A Poetic Revolution of Truth, Healing, and Belonging. And she's the mother to three amazing human beings. So, Shahmeen, we're so glad to have you on the podcast today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Why don't we start by you sharing more about, who the heart and soul of Shahmeen is? Tell us about you.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to start with the name of my business as you were saying it. I thought, oh, I should probably explain. So Anjali is a Sanskrit word that means heartfelt offering. And if you've ever gone to a yoga class, you might have noticed at the end, sometimes the teacher will say namaste and they'll bring their hands to this position. So this is actually called Anjali Mudra, which mudra just means hand position. And so Anjali means heartfelt offering. So when you're saying namaste to someone, you would bring your hands like this because you're basically saying that I see you, the divinity in me sees the divinity in you. And that's a very heartfelt offering. So when I'm thinking about one day becoming a mother, I thought that I would name my daughter Anjali if I had a daughter. It's a girl's name in India, and I thought, well, that's a great name. But as it turns out, I have two sons and a stepdaughter. And so when my boys were born, I could not give them that name. And so I decided to name my business Anjali. And I really think that that was perfect because it is my heartfelt offering, this work that I do with leaders and, well, human beings. And
Yeah.
so it's very much comes straight from my heart.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems like in leadership, I think we're hearing more and more about that and seeing more, right? People
Yeah.
talking about heart-centered leadership and
Yes.
creating connections with people. So it sounds like that's a lot of what you do.
Yes, yes. I've been at it for about 20 years now. So I think it's finally come into the mainstream, but it was definitely not when I first started.
You're on the
And
cutting edge, right?
yeah,
And
so
now
and
everybody's
so
catching up.
yeah. And actually what used to happen was I would actually get quite marginalized at the beginning of my career because the people would say things to me like, you don't have enough business acumen and you're so heartfelt, but you need to be more assertive. And so I took the feedback and I said, well, partially true for sure. I could strengthen in some of those other areas. And what that led me on was really a journey of balancing, finding both, finding the heart and the head and the backbone and the intuition and sort of, bringing the science and the art together. That's been part of my story too, is, how do we bring both? How do we bring the things that seem like they're opposite from each other and one seems to have been favored over another over so much of my lifetime anyway. How do we bring these things together so that one doesn't have to be better than the other and we can actually have a bit of both?
Right. Yeah. And that's such a great segue into intuition because, again, I think it's something that, lots of people are just learning about and realizing that there are these other, sources of wisdom that they can
Yes.
access, these
Yeah.
other tools that they can bring to more traditional types of just engagement in the world and work,
Right.
right? So this is an Inner Access 101 podcast. And so how did you first become aware or involved with Inner Access 101 and Lori Wilson?
Yeah, well, I met a woman who is an energy healer in the United States. And we were talking during the pandemic, and she was going to host some trainings. But at that time, being Canadian, we were not allowed to leave. So I couldn't travel to her training. And she said, I know someone in Canada who trains people that you might be interested in her. Her name's Lori Wilson. And she said she's somewhere in Canada. And I thought, okay, well, Canada's a big place, right? Like, where might she be? And she said, oh, I don't know the name of the city. And then I Googled Lori and found to my great delight that she's in Guelph and I'm in Waterloo. So we're about 30 minutes away from each other by
Nice.
car. So
Yeah.
so that led me to Lori and I started to speak with her about, what she was up to and looked at her website and realized, oh my gosh, there's so much synergy and resonance here. I think I have to find out more.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, we are all about good news on this
Mm,
podcast. So can you share with us a good news story that, it might involve your personal experiences or your
yeah,
professional experiences, or maybe you've got a couple stories, both with something, specific with intuition where a particular skill or practice has had a significant impact in your life.
sure. Okay, so I've been doing this work with leaders, leadership coaching, executive coaching for a long time, and often I would blurt out these things that kind of came to me. And I knew it was intuition. I knew intuition was sort of this general thing that was sort of this amorphous, unspecific thing called intuition. And I would say things, and my clients would be like, well, how did you know that? Or I'd hear them say something, and I had just thought that sentence right before they said it. Um, or they would be talking about something, and I would ask them a question, and they'd be just like amazed at how perfect that question was, or how it matched with something they were thinking about right in that moment. So I knew that I had good intuition, I guess. That's what I would have called it, or I have really strong intuition, but I didn't know anything else about it. So when I met Lori, and I started by taking the business intuition actually. So because I thought it was going to be more relevant to my work, since I worked in the business realm. And one of the things that really struck me right away was that it's not this blob of stuff. It's actually quite specific. Like there are specific sources that we can tune into or access, these sources of wisdom, as you were calling them. And interestingly enough, I was thinking about it that way, but didn't actually know what I didn't know. So I was attributing it to, being connected to the earth or being connected to spirit or, maybe being a bit psychic. I wasn't really quite sure because I didn't have the vocabulary. I just had the experience.
Right.
So I think what's happened is I feel like I feel like I've become more responsible.
Hmm.
Yeah, at using my intuition.
And can you point to a particular, again, skill or practice that you find yourself just, using frequently? Again, whether it's in your personal life or your professional life,
Mhm.
or a particular source of wisdom that just, has that you've really developed?
So
Yeah.
after I did the business intuition, I did the 1 year, 10-month
Right.
mastery program. So we took all the courses. So I cannot remember exactly which one, but perhaps the first one, we sort of found our guides, like who are our guides, and sort of made a relationship with the guides. And I think for me, So my guides are the Council of Trees.
Oh,
And I learned that actually I've been so close to this guidance for so long that I hadn't known that it wasn't me. I
oh,
sort of collapsed my identity with my intuition. I couldn't turn it off.
oh, interesting.
Yes, I couldn't turn it off. So now what was happening was I was becoming subject to the emotions and feelings of everybody around me. So, and it was a great gift to have in these moments, like I was describing with my clients, but it was actually quite distressing when I came upon people who were upset. Like I'd be at the airport, I travel a lot. I'd be at the airport and I'd hear a child crying, and it
Right,
would just like it would rock me to my core, I would start crying. There wasn't enough of a boundary between me and the other because I was so open. And
right,
so what I learned very quickly, very early days in the trainings with Lori, was how to turn it off, like how to
right.
not be on all the time.
Yeah, I've found that in many of her courses, she'll touch on a process, that you might adopt to begin and to
Yes.
end so that there's some sort of
Yes.
really clear lines there. Maybe you can talk
Yes.
about that a little bit more and just a little bit more specific. And
Yeah.
that sounds like the Council of Trees is something that you knew as an aspect of yourself all along. And so how do you sort of begin
Yeah.
getting guidance from them and how do you end that?
Yeah. Well, now I'm much more, it's a very small ritual. I mean, I just sort of sit, I take a breath. I imagine there's a place in the forest near my house where I see the trees sort of in a semicircle, the way I would envision the Council of Trees would look. So I sort of picture myself there. I take
Gotcha.
a couple of breaths and then I use the two pen method. I do a lot of writing because I'm a writer as well. So I
Gotcha.
often consult with the Council of Trees with two pens. A green pen is the trees speaking, the black pen is me speaking or asking questions. And then when I am complete, I actually say that thank you, and I bring it to a close. I, close my book. I kind of, thank the trees. And then the other thing that Lori taught me that has been the most helpful, she talks about herself as walk around Lori, like when she's
Mm,
not using
right,
her intuition.
right,
And so I say, walk around Shahmeen. I'm walk around Shahmeen. I'm just Shahmeen living her life, doing
right,
her thing, and not needing to know all this stuff about other people or feel so deeply what other people are feeling.
right.
Yeah, so it's it's that, those two things, having the ritual and then just that phrase, walk around Shahmeen.
Yeah, so I love that piece about the sort of the beginning and ending rituals are pretty simple, right? They don't have to be anything super complex or
Yeah,
I think that's something that Lori teaches too is she takes a lot of mystery, right, out of,
yeah,
sort of what it means to find your intuition, tap into your intuition and sort of the process around that. And you're just knowing the right thing to ask or the right thing to say and then that creates such a powerful moment with you and your client
it does. And it
resonating
takes
with
them,
them.
it takes them out of their heads into their own intuition, into their own hearts, into
Mhm.
their own depths. Um, it means that the conversations are more rich, less heady, less concrete in
Right.
some ways, more unusual for them, and but very, very helpful in a way that I think some of the more cognitive work that they're used to is not.
Right. Yeah. We, especially in the business world, it seems like we're so analytical, right? We're
Yes,
we're great at the analysis, the
yes,
brain part of
exactly.
the,
They
yeah.
want data and stuff, and then when these things happen, they say, well, how did you know that? How do you, or why did you say that? And I will say, I have always said, I have a relationship with my intuition that's very strong, and sometimes that's what happens. I just, you know, I'm told or I'm shown that this is a something I should raise with you, and I do.
So in addition to the channeling, is there any other intuition skill or practice that you find yourself using?
The medical intuition was another part of the program that I really enjoyed. If I was to actually dig into one thing, it might be that, like
The-
as a future kind of
Gotcha.
endeavor for myself, because I have very accurate scanning skills.
Interesting. So it sounds like similar to what you were describing previously. The medical intuition course kind of just gave a structure to what you were already sort of
Yes,
aware of and using,
yes,
and then
yes.
maybe gave you some language and some, processes around that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And medical intuition is something I see pop up, and it's fun when friends pop up and say, "Hey, have you heard of medical intuition?" And I'm like, "Well, as a matter of fact, I have." Did you hear about it? So yeah. Okay, so we've talked about, you've taken a few different classes, with Lori with Inner Access 101. Is there an offering that she has that you're just like, oh yeah, that's a great one. I love that one.
Right now, my favorite offering is Grandmother's Daily Focus. I find that listening to Grandmother every day is kind of like another personal development project of mine, because the invitation or the thing to consider every day, the focus every day, has just aligned so perfectly with where I am, especially in the last 3 months or so. It's been uncanny. So
Yeah,
there's that. And then I think the other thing is the overall intention to trust ourselves.
right.
Like, the strongest thing I could say right now is
Hmm.
I trust myself
Mm,
more than ever before.
yeah.
But now I have this sense that I can trust my knowing, my innate knowing. That's the way those are the words I would use to describe.
Yeah.
My innate knowing is so incredibly trustworthy. And if I'm working on something and I have to try really hard, I know I'm not in the right. I know I shouldn't. If I have to overcome or push really hard, to me, that's a signal that no, don't do that. So, or if I haven't done something, there's a part of me that will say, oh, you're a procrastinator. You should have done that last week. But the other part of me, this wiser part, says, no, there's a reason why that hasn't happened yet. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're a procrastinator. It's because that wasn't the thing that was supposed to happen yet. And inevitably, every time later, I find out, yes, that's right. That was right. I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I didn't push. I'm glad. So I'm not saying I'm not trying. I'm not saying that I'm not working,
Yeah.
but the pushing against or trying to overcome or trying to force something is so not part of how I operate. Or if it is, it's a signal to me to stop, because I'm going down the path that is more difficult, really. So that's the thing that's come out of this for me, is this, more than anything else, more than any skill or any ability, is to trust myself. I feel like that is definitely the biggest outcome for me so far from this
Yeah, that's
part.
amazing. We're so conditioned to effort, right? I mean, everything is so sort of built around efforting and pushing and, just even how we define success and
Hmm.
the work ethic and all those things. And so, yeah, it's pretty amazing that you've come to this place where you even recognize what trusting yourself even feels like and what it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like,
Yes.
right? That
Yes.
is huge. And it sounds like over time, there's been a shift there. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, that is something, boy, you just wish that for everybody, don't you? Sort of
Yeah.
be able to tap into what's the best path for me, and
Right.
just knowing that. Yeah.
Yes.
And recognizing when it's not, right? And
Mhm.
again, some of these signals that we, maybe ignore because we think, oh, we just need to work harder, or we just need to push through, or
Yep.
or
Yeah.
like I've got this grandmaster plan. Like, what do you mean
Yeah.
it might not be the right way
Oh,
of
if I could just, I mean, if you could see the things I've done and the overcomplication that I've created for myself in many ways over the years. I think had I had this confidence in myself and I use the word certainty, and I realized that there's something about that I feel I need to say is like there's an earlier time in an adult's life where certainty is based on ego and arrogance and sort of immaturity, like a less
Hmm.
mature.
Hmm.
That's not the certainty I'm talking about now. I'm talking about something that happens after you've kind of done that for a while and then, kind of traveled more years. I absolutely trust myself. I
Hmm.
trust my way. I trust myself. It's sometimes looks so different from everybody around me or the context that I'm in. I'm in some pretty type A groups, as
Hmm.
well as some very, kind of not type A groups. I'm in
Right.
writing groups, I'm in marketing groups, I'm in, coaches groups and then groups with people who are studying intuition with Lori. So very different groups of people, but there are often times in those type A environments that so much of the business world sort of exists in where
Right.
I know my way is very different. It's not what everybody else would think. It's not the same as what the prevailing thought would be. And
Hmm.
it's difficult to trust yourself when you're that sort of feel so different from the norm or from the wave. But I do. I just do.
We're so quick to adjust to what we sort of perceive they want from us. So it's yeah, what a gift that you're able to sort of just stay steady, and what a gift that you're a coach. That seems amazing. Again, that you're able to share some of these things as you work with clients. When you look back on
Mhm.
your life and you think, okay, this is who I was and how I approached things before. So
Mhm.
here's who I was before and how I
Mhm.
functioned. And then now, after I've honed some of these skills and these awarenesses, and how would you say intuition has changed your life?
Mm. I want to say boundary, but it's not like a boundary. It's probably a boundary, but to me, it feels more like if you could imagine a column,
Hmm.
maybe I would call it a hara line, sort of a line of intentionality and a line of me as in contrast to not me.
Okay, sure.
Just that I know what is not mine
Mm.
more now than I did before. I'm not as emotionally attached to what happens in my work as I was before, which might sound like it's like I care less, but it's not true. I care as much when I'm doing my work. I feel like I'm less collapsing myself with the other. And
Mm.
I think that that means I can serve my clients better. I think for me, actually having a boundary
Hmm.
is more useful.
Yeah, it just makes me think. I'm not going to remember the exact title. I'll put it in the show notes for folks. But it's a boundaries webinar that Lori has, right? And she talks about the basket, and sometimes you're holding the basket for others, but sometimes other times you're in the basket, right? And
Yes.
you're very clear about what the boundaries of the basket that you're in are. So that just reminds me of that a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like before I was more like diffuse and just everywhere, and now I feel like there's this column that is um provides structure that I didn't have, I guess,
Yeah.
really, to say it simply.
Okay, Shameen. So for our last question, what would you say to somebody who is wanting to learn about intuition, maybe try some of the things that, we've talked about on this podcast or things that they've heard about or learned about, but maybe they're a little nervous or afraid, and that could be for any reason, right? Maybe they're
Mhm.
just like, oh, that seems kind of weird, or
Mhm.
is anybody else or
Mhm.
maybe they're like you and like I've been experiencing these things, but I'm not quite sure what to do with it all. So what would you say to somebody who's maybe just dipping their toe into this idea of using their intuition?
I would say that if you're already having a sense of this, like I was talking about, just having words that sometimes or you say something and the other person says, "Oh my gosh, that's perfect. That was the perfect thing." I would say it's your birthright to know.
Hmm.
It's it's not, and it's not as weird as you think it is.
Right. Yeah.
It's not as out there as you think. And I would say find your way to, even if you just find your way to listening to grandmother
Mhm.
um, on the daily, that would be a very low risk way to enter into this work. And then from there, consider taking the foundations program just to learn a little bit more and kind of play with some of this. Yeah, that's what I would say. I would say that it's this is not as magical and unique as you might think. Because I thought, no one else can do this, only me. I'm like, special. This is some weird thing that I can do. And then I learned that no, actually, no, everybody could have access to this if they wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've mentioned the daily focus a couple times, and I think that is an entry point for so many people. It was for me for sure. And
Mm.
so, again, for our listeners on the YouTube channel, that is actually there for you to check out some of those daily
Yeah.
focus moments. And it's, it's basically sort of grandmother sharing with us the energetic climate of each day. And so, yeah. And to your point, sometimes it feels uncannily personal.
Hmm. Yes.
Right? Like it's very relevant. I'm thinking, did she like right was that for me?
Right.
Because
Right,
it
right.
feels like that was for
Exactly.
me. Yeah.
Exactly. I often feel that. I just think, oh my
Yeah.
God. Or literally something that I thought about right before I listen
Hmm.
become is the thing that she's talking about.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just it seems like a very easeful way into this. I think the invitation is really just to consider that there are sources of wisdom beyond our heads, despite what we've been taught. And
Right.
when you can relax and sort of enjoy the experience of allowing that to be part of your life, your day, amazing things can happen, and also just regular things can happen. It's not, it's just it. You deserve it. You deserve to have access to your own innate knowing. I call it like with my clients or when I'm coaching them, sometimes I ask them like if there was a wise teacher within yourself, what would they say?
They say.
And
Yeah.
I think like really that's the key. Like, can we tune into the wise teacher? Whatever the source of it is,
Mhm.
there there's wisdom that is speaking to you. And if you allow it, allow yourself to hear it, allow yourself to trust that it has something for you, um, life just feels a little bit better.
Yeah. So well said. Thank you. Well, this has been a delightful interview. And so thank you for coming on and being one of our very first guests on this podcast. So it's very
For
exciting.
having
And
me.
yeah, just lovely to kick off this interview with you. Now,
Thank
if
you.
people would like to learn more about you specifically, where can they find you?
Hmm. Well, I am on LinkedIn. That's my that so social media wise, you can find me there. I'm there mostly. I do use Instagram as well, but most of the time you'll see me on LinkedIn speaking about leadership. Also my website, anjalileadership.com. It's ANJALI leadership.com. And you can find out more about the programs and products that I offer there as well. Or you could always get the book. As you mentioned, I wrote
Yeah.
a book with some poetry and memoir in it. So that's another way to learn more about me, I
Yeah, great.
guess.
Well, we'll
And
put all of that in the show notes. We'll put your LinkedIn handle and your website and some information about your book as well.
yeah.
So, all right, to all our listeners, please be sure to visit the Inner Access 101 website and take a look at the many intuition-based courses that are available there. So you can find links to the website and to the various social media handles for Inner Access 101, all in the show notes. And as Lori Wilson, the owner and founder of Inner Access 101, always says, in all things, trust yourself first. I'm Karen Gaborik, and I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on Good News Intuition Works.